Mira drove the family car along the quiet road while the evening sky slowly turned darker and the cool wind brushed across the trees on both sides of the highway, and she felt tired after a long day, and only wanted to reach home without any more stress, while her husband Daniel sat beside her in silence and relaxed his hands on his lap and watched the road ahead with a calm, steady expression because he wanted this simple ride to feel like a normal moment in their busy lives, and he liked when they had peaceful drives together without any formal duty or attention, since he served as the police chief of their town, and almost everyone recognized him when he wore his uniform, and tonight he just wanted a quiet time with his wife. But as Mira turned toward the main lane, bright lights flashed suddenly behind them, and a patrol car rushed closer and signaled her to pull over, which confused her because she had followed every rule on the road, and Daniel noticed the sudden change in the mood and felt a quiet tension rising as the car stopped at the side of the road, and the patrol car halted behind them with strong headlights shining into their rear window, and Mira tried to stay calm, even though she felt her nerves tightening because she had no idea why she was being stopped, and Daniel kept watching with a careful eye as the officer stepped out of the patrol car and walked toward them with fast, impatient steps, and his name tag read Hale, and the way he approached the door already told Daniel that this interaction might not be a fair one, and Hale tapped on Myra's window with a sharp, quick motion that felt unnecessary, and spoke in a firm, demanding tone without greeting her or explaining any reason for the stop, and he asked for her license, but did so in a way that sounded more like an accusation than a request, and Mira politely handed it over, while keeping her voice steady because she believed in showing respect, even when the other person did not offer the same, and Hale continued asking questions that did not match the situation, and interrupted her answers repeatedly, and acted as if she had already done something wrong, even though she clearly had not, and Daniel kept watching every small detail of Hale's behavior, and he recognized the pattern because he had heard earlier concerns about this officer's attitude, and he had already spoken to him once about treating people with patience and fairness, but seeing it unfold directly in front of him, and directed at Mira, made the moment heavier and more personal, and Mira kept both hands visible on the wheel and breathed slowly so she would not show how uneasy she felt because she did not want any confusion or misunderstanding to escalate the stop, and Hale stepped back to his patrol car pretending to run checks that should have taken only seconds, but he stretched the time far longer, and Mira glanced at Daniel, who gave her a small gentle nod that told her to stay calm, while he observed every action before reacting, and when Hale returned, he used the same sharp tone and claimed that Mira had drifted across a lane line earlier, which she knew she had not done, and Hale spoke in a way that suggested he did not expect her to question anything he said, and he kept repeating unnecessary questions while sounding irritated at every response, and a car passed by slowly, and Mira felt embarrassed sitting there while being treated unfairly for no reason she could understand, and Daniel listened with growing concern as he realized this was not a mistake or a confusion but a clear example of an officer misusing his position through impatience and rude behavior, and he allowed Hale to finish speaking because he wanted to know how far he would go before stepping in, and then Hale demanded that Mira step out of the car for what he called a routine conversation, and Mira followed the instruction because she respected the uniform even when the person wearing it did not show the same respect to her, and Daniel stepped out from the passenger side at the same moment, and Hale did not notice him right away because he was too focused on Mira, and when Mira stood beside the car, Hale continued speaking to her in the same tone while ignoring her calm attempts to explain, and then he finally turned and noticed Daniel standing behind her, and Hale hesitated because something about Daniel's calm, quiet presence made him pause, and he looked at him more closely and seemed puzzled because Daniel was out of uniform and looked like any other resident, but he still carried an air of authority that Hale could feel even without recognizing his face, and Mira watched as Daniel stepped a little closer with the same calm strength he always carried, and she felt a small wave of relief because she knew he would not let unfairness continue any longer, and the moment shifted as Hale realized this stop was not going the way he expected, and a silence settled on the roadside while the cool evening breeze brushed across the trees and the headlights glowed behind them like distant reflections of a much bigger truth that was about to unfold. Hale stood frozen for a moment as he finally noticed Daniel standing beside the car, and something in Daniel's steady, calm posture made the officer shift uncomfortably because even without a uniform, Daniel carried a presence that changed the feeling of the entire moment, and Mira watched the tension rise quietly as Hale tried to collect himself and continued speaking, but now his tone was less sharp and his words were less confident because he sensed that the man standing before him was not an ordinary passenger, and Daniel asked him in a low, steady voice to repeat the reason for the traffic stop, and Hale tried to explain again, but the explanation sounded weak, as if he no longer believed his own claim, and he glanced at Mira, and then back at Daniel, trying to understand who this man was and why he felt so unsettled. And Daniel listened without interrupting, and his calm expression never shifted even when Hale added small details to support his earlier claim. And Mira noticed how Hale kept adjusting his stance as if he wanted to step back but did not know if it would make him appear uncertain. And Daniel finally asked him to clarify why the stop had taken so long and why he had spoken in such a harsh tone. And Hale tried to answer, but each attempt revealed more inconsistency, and Mira stood silently near the open door, watching the exchange and feeling a mix of relief and nervousness because she knew Daniel was giving Hale a chance to explain himself, but she also sensed that this officer had run out of reasonable answers. And the cool night air moved across the roadside, carrying the faint sound of distant traffic, while the tension around them grew heavier. And Hale opened his patrol notebook and pretended to check something, but Daniel stepped slightly closer and asked him if the notebook contained any actual reason for the stop, or if he was simply trying to delay the moment. And Hale shut it quickly as if he did not want Daniel to see that it was empty. And Daniel kept his tone calm and respectful, but firm enough to show that he would not overlook unfair treatment, and his quiet strength began to unsettle Hale even more. And Mira lowered her gaze for a moment, trying to steady her breath, because the situation had shifted in a direction she did not expect, and she felt grateful for Daniel's presence and the way he handled the moment with control and patience. And Hale finally asked Daniel who he was because he felt the pressure of the situation growing beyond his ability to manage. And Daniel did not answer right away, and instead he asked Hale again to confirm the reason for the stop. And Hale repeated the same unsteady explanation that Mira had heard before, and his voice trembled slightly as he spoke because he could feel the weight of Daniel's questions pressing on the truth he had been trying to avoid. And Daniel nodded slowly, as if he had finally heard enough, and then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his identification card and held it toward Hale without speaking. And Hale leaned forward, and when his eyes read the name printed on the card, his entire expression changed at once, and the color drained from his face, and he took a small step back in shock because now he understood that the quiet man standing beside him was Daniel Reed, the police chief, the person who oversaw every officer in the department, including Hale himself, and the man whose signature appeared on his performance reviews. And Hale struggled to speak and tried to adjust his tone, but the words came out uneven. And Mira watched the moment closely, feeling a sense of justice rising quietly in the air. And Daniel did not raise his voice, and he did not show anger, and instead he simply asked Hale why he spoke to Mira in an impatient and disrespectful manner. And Hale tried to answer, but his voice cracked because there was no clear explanation he could give. And Daniel asked him if he thought his behavior reflected the values of the department. And Hale shook his head slowly as he tried to recover from the shock of discovering who he had been addressing. And Daniel stepped slightly forward and told him that every officer carried a responsibility to treat all citizens with fairness and patience, and to speak to them with respect no matter the situation. And Mira listened carefully as Daniel continued explaining the importance of maintaining trust between the community and those who served in uniform. And Hale nodded repeatedly, but the nods felt more like apologies made without the strength to support them. And Daniel asked him if he had any evidence to support his claim that Mira had crossed a lane line, and Hale hesitated for a long moment before admitting softly that he did not. And Mira felt a quiet wave of sadness because she realized the stop had never been based on any real concern. And Daniel stood tall and calm as he told Hale that the stop would be reviewed, and that actions like this created unnecessary fear and discomfort for people who were simply driving home. And Hale lowered his head because he finally understood the weight of his behavior. And Mira watched the headlights reflecting against the empty road and felt a sense of relief slowly rising because Daniel had taken control of the moment with fairness and dignity. And Hale tried to offer a formal apology, but his words came out awkward and unsteady. And Daniel accepted the apology but made it clear that the matter was not closed and that the department would address it properly. And Hale nodded again, feeling the consequences settling around him like a quiet storm. And Mira stepped closer to Daniel, feeling safer now than she had felt since the moment the patrol car lights first flashed behind them, and the night air began to feel less heavy, and the road that had felt tense now seemed calm again, as if the truth had cleared the atmosphere around them. And Daniel gently guided Mira back toward the car door. And Hale stood silently by his patrol vehicle, unsure of what to do next as the chief continued observing him with a steady gaze. And the moment marked a turning point for Hale, who now understood that every action carried weight, and every citizen deserved respect and fairness. And the evening sky stretched open above them, carrying the promise of a new lesson learned, and the beginning of accountability that Hale could no longer avoid. Daniel stood beside the car with a calm strength that filled the quiet roadside, and Hale remained frozen near his patrol vehicle unsure of how to recover from the shock of realizing that he had spoken to the police chief with careless attitude, and Mira watched both men carefully, feeling the weight of the moment slowly shifting as Daniel prepared to speak again, and the soft evening breeze carried a gentle hum across the empty road, while distant lights flickered far away, and created a quiet backdrop for the turning point she sensed was coming, and Daniel stepped closer to Hale with steady movements and asked him to explain once more why the stop had been extended far longer than necessary, and Hale swallowed hard and struggled to find words because the truth he avoided earlier was now standing in front of him without any place to hide, and Mira felt a mix of relief and sadness because she realized this was not only about her, but about every person who faced moments like this without a voice strong enough to protect them, and Daniel kept his tone firm yet respectful as he explained that the purpose of any traffic stop was to protect the community, not intimidate them, and he reminded Hale that officers had a responsibility to maintain fairness, especially when dealing with citizens who were calm and cooperative, and Hale nodded with slow, uneasy movements, and he looked at the ground, because facing the chief felt heavier than he had imagined, and Daniel asked him if he understood how his behavior could damage trust between the department and the community, and Hale nodded again with shame filling his face, and Mira listened quietly, seeing how Daniel handled the moment with patience instead of anger, and she admired the way he carried authority without using it to harm anyone, and Daniel told Hale that respect was not something given by rank but earned through actions, and that every officer including him needed to hold that value close in every situation, and Hale tried to speak, and offered another apology, but his words trembled with sincerity this time, and he admitted softly that he let his frustration guide his behavior, and that he should not have spoken the way he did, especially without a clear reason for the stop, and Mira felt her heart ease a little because hearing him admit his mistake brought a sense of closure to the confusion she had felt earlier, and Daniel then asked Hale if he remembered their previous conversation about attitude and community feedback, and Hale nodded with embarrassment because he had been warned before, and he knew this was not a simple mistake, but a pattern he needed to correct, and Daniel explained that accountability was important, not to punish, but to help officers grow into better versions of themselves, and to protect the trust that citizens placed in them every day, and Hale listened carefully as Daniel outlined the seriousness of his actions without raising his voice because strength did not need to be loud, and Mira watched the exchange with admiration, feeling that Daniel represented the kind of leadership the department needed. And Daniel then told Hale that he would need to come to the station in the morning for a complete review of the incident, and that any future actions must reflect the values of fairness and service that the badge represented, and Hale accepted the instruction with a deep breath, knowing that this moment would stay with him for a long time, and Mira stood near the open door of the car watching Daniel, and feeling safe in his presence, and she felt grateful that he handled the moment not with anger but with clarity and dignity, and the tension in the air slowly lifted as Hale stepped back toward his patrol vehicle, knowing the conversation was nearing its end, and Daniel turned to Mira with a gentle reassuring glance, as if telling her that everything was under control now, and she stepped closer to him, and took a slow breath, feeling lighter than she had felt since the patrol car lights first appeared behind them, and Daniel opened the car door for her, and she sat inside with relief filling her chest, and when Daniel returned to Hale, he delivered one final reminder that every stop should be based on truth, patience, and fairness because citizens deserved to feel safe and respected, and Hale nodded deeply, taking in every word, and understanding the importance of the lesson that had unfolded on this quiet road, and Daniel walked back to the car with calm, purposeful steps while Hale remained near his patrol vehicle reflecting on everything he had done and everything he needed to change, and Mira watched the road ahead as Daniel settled into the passenger seat, and she placed her hand gently on his arm, offering silent gratitude for the way he stood beside her with unwavering strength and understanding, and Daniel looked at her with a small warm expression before telling her they could continue their drive now, and she started the engine, and the car moved forward slowly, leaving behind the patrol lights that had once filled her with fear but now served as a reminder of truth revealed and respect restored, and the sky above them stretched wide and peaceful as they drove into the night, carrying with them the memory of a moment that had shown the power of calm courage and the importance of fairness in every action, and Hale remained on the roadside watching their car disappear into the distance, and he felt the weight of responsibility settle on him, and he understood that this night had changed him in a way he could not ignore. And the quiet road stood still, holding the echo of a lesson learned with dignity and truth. Mira drove forward with a slow, steady pace while the quiet road stretched before them like a long, peaceful ribbon, and Daniel sat beside her with a calm expression that softened the tension still lingering in the air, and the soft hum of the engine filled the silence inside the car, while Mira tried to release the last bit of fear from her chest because even though the situation had turned in their favor, the Memory of Hale's earlier attitude still echoed through her thoughts, and Daniel noticed her slow breaths and placed a gentle reassuring hand on her arm, reminding her that she was safe, and that the moment had already passed. And Mira offered him a small grateful smile as the streetlights reflected off the windshield and cast warm glows across their faces, and the night slowly regained its quiet rhythm as they reached the town limits and moved closer to home. And Mira kept thinking about how the stop might have gone if Daniel had not been with her, and the thought made her grateful for his steady presence and strong sense of justice. And Daniel could see the thoughts passing across her face, even without words, because he knew her well enough to understand the worries she tried to hide. And he told her in a calm voice that fairness was not a gift but a right, and that no one should ever feel uneasy when they had done nothing wrong. And his words settled in her heart like a protective blanket and eased her tension even more. And as they turned into their neighborhood, the houses stood quiet with warm windows glowing softly, and the calm atmosphere made Mira feel like she was finally stepping away from the heaviness that had surrounded them on that lonely road. And Daniel watched the familiar streets pass by and thought about the responsibility he carried as police chief, and he knew that the incident with Hale was not just about one moment, but a reminder of how much his leadership mattered in shaping the way officers acted every day. And he believed strongly that respect, dignity, and fairness must guide every choice his department made. And Mira parked the car in their driveway, and the soft click of the engine turning off brought a sense of closure to the long, stressful evening. And Daniel stepped out and walked around to open her door with gentle care, and she appreciated the small gesture because it reminded her of the calm strength he always carried. And they walked toward their home side by side while a cool breeze brushed past them, carrying the scent of evening trees. And Mira leaned slightly against Daniel, feeling safe in his presence. And once inside their warm living room, they sat together on the couch, and the comfortable silence between them felt like a healing moment after everything that had happened. And Mira finally let out a deep breath she had been holding inside her, and she told Daniel that the situation had scared her, even though she tried to stay calm. And Daniel listened carefully and held her hand gently and told her that her patience, her strength, and her calm behavior had shown grace even in a difficult moment. And his words brought comfort to her heart, and slowly the stress of the night began to fade. And after a while, Daniel stood up and walked toward his small office because he knew there was still work to be done. And Mira watched him go with a soft smile because she knew his dedication came not from authority but from a genuine desire to protect people. And Daniel sat at his desk and opened a notebook and began writing down the details of the stop while they were still fresh in his memory. And he noted the time, the location, the behavior he witnessed, and the questions he asked Hale. And he did this not out of anger, but out of responsibility to ensure fairness and accountability. And he knew that leadership required honesty, even when it meant addressing difficult issues within his own team. And Mira brought him a warm cup of tea and placed it on the desk beside him, and he looked up at her with gratitude as she told him that she was proud of the way he handled everything with calm strength and respect. And Daniel gave a gentle smile before returning to his notes, and the house grew quiet as the night deepened. And Mira sat nearby reading while Daniel finished documenting the incident. And once he closed the notebook, he joined her on the couch, and they talked softly about everyday things, letting the peaceful moment wash over them like a calm tide. And the next morning arrived with a soft golden light filling their living room, and Mira made breakfast while Daniel dressed for work and prepared himself for the meeting he had scheduled with Hale. And when he arrived at the station, the officers greeted him respectfully, and he nodded back with his usual calm composure. And Hale waited inside the meeting room looking nervous and unsure of what to expect, and Daniel entered the room with a steady presence. And Hale stood up immediately, feeling the weight of the previous night still heavy on his shoulders. And Daniel asked him to sit, and then began speaking about the responsibility of the badge and the importance of serving the community with respect. And Hale listened carefully and apologized sincerely and admitted that he had allowed his frustration to cloud his judgment. And Daniel explained that the department could not afford moments that damaged trust between officers and citizens. And Hale nodded with deep understanding because he knew the chief was right. And after their conversation, Daniel gave him a clear plan to improve his conduct, including training, guidance, and regular evaluations. And Hale accepted every step with sincerity, knowing it was necessary for his growth. And when the meeting ended, Daniel walked out with the confidence that the lesson had been delivered with fairness, not anger. And Mira later heard about how the meeting went and felt relieved because she knew that Daniel had once again handled the situation with balance and integrity, and that his actions would help create a safer and more respectful environment for everyone in the community. And as the day continued, Mira went about her tasks with a lighter heart, knowing that the fear she had felt on the road had turned into something meaningful and positive, because Daniel had used his role not only to protect her, but to guide change for the better. And that night, when they sat together on their porch, watching the soft glow of the setting sun, Mira felt grateful for the strength that comes from calm truth and fairness, and Daniel felt proud knowing that every day gave him a chance to serve with dignity and lead with purpose, and the quiet evenings settled around them like a warm embrace, reminding them that even difficult moments could create pathways to understanding, trust, and growth.